How's it going, guys? So, I'm back here today to talk about a project that I've been working on, kind of tying things together, trying to, this has all been kind of like selfishly done, I suppose. Like, I distro hop so much and I reinstall Arch so much that, like, I've been kind of trying to, like, make things easier for me, but also share, like, the things that I've created for other people, or with other people. Like my CyberXero theme, like, I've had a couple people ask me and be like, well, why does it support Debian and Arch, but not Fedora? And the reason for that is very simple. It's because I go back and forth between Arch and PeakOS, and I wanted my installer and my theme and everything to cleanly install on both PeakOS and Arch Linux. So that's why that's like that. Specifically because I go back and forth. But as you recall, I've made videos in the past about Zero Linux. I am going to be probably delisting my Zero Linux review here soon, and I'm not going to go too much into the details of why. I will tell you that it basically has to do with the fact that I forked the Zero Linux Toolkit, and a bunch of drama ensued off the back of that. And now me and the Zero Linux developer Dark Zero are no longer on speaking terms. Mostly because, well, he decided to essentially ear hustle me in another server and took what I said out of context and decided to bite my head off. And long story short, I'm not gonna go super deep into that stuff because I don't care. Like, my dad's in the hospital. I've got a bunch of shit going on. I'm doing this shit to, like, take my mind off things, and I'm not dealing with any stress for people in the open source community being dickwads. So we're gonna talk about my CyberXero toolkit, what it does, some improvements that I've made, and, like, it's still very much work in progress. I'm doing more and more stuff to it. But this is a fork of the Zero Linux toolkit. It all kind of spawned from the fact that, like, I really liked the Zero Linux toolkit. I thought it was cool. Like, it had potential. It does some things that are nice and convenient for new users, and even users who just don't want to, who like GUIs and stuff. I personally like a good GUI if it's done well and implements things correctly. I find it a little bit quicker than, implementing some of this stuff in the button, through typing in terminal commands. So, I had talked to Dark Zero about the possibility of a minimal ISO because, well, my biggest issue personally with using Zero Linux was that it's kind of bloated. And it is. Like, you can, like, he has installation scripts. You can go look at all this. Like, a lot of extra tooling and stuff gets installed that doesn't really need to be there for a functional system. Or, he's, like, trying to cover all the bases of, like, what anybody could possibly want for any given scenario. But what it ultimately translates to for most users is you've got a shitload of packages on your system that you just don't need, that you probably will never use. And yeah, that was my biggest issue with it. Was like, well, it's pretty chunky. It's like 800 packages, bigger than, my typical Arch install. So, can we get a minimal option where we can just, like, install, and he didn't want to do that. And then, so I was like, okay, well, maybe I can just install the Zero Toolkit, get the Zero Linux repo, or, download it from source, install. Well, no, couldn't do that because there's a distribution check on the toolkit, preventing it from running on any other system other than a system that's running Zero Linux. And then I talked to him about that, and he didn't want to make it available on other systems because obviously it's a big draw of, like, what makes Zero Linux attractive to new users. So I was like, okay, well, you're not budgeting on anything here, so I guess I will take matters into my own hands. And that's exactly what I did. And I forked the Zero Linux project, or the Zero Linux Toolkit, and then started doing my own thing, and then a bunch of drama ensued. Needless to say, he's not a fan. He's not. The long and short of it is, he initially came at me sideways about it because he claimed that he tried to claim that me removing, because he had Ko-Fi links and stuff down here. These are my links. He had Ko-Fi and other things, and then in the about section he had back end work done by Sense and front end GUI blah 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 done by CyberXero. Basically just an about section talking about the authors of the toolkit, because he worked with another person on it. Nothing about copyright, nothing about GPL, nothing about none of that. Which means that I'm within my rights to change it. Like, you don't have to keep someone's name on the UI of a project if it's been forked. GPL requires like a few things, and that's you keep the license the same. You don't change the license. Any copyright notices that are there have to stay and can't be messed with. Same thing with the license. License can't be messed with or changed in any way. It has to stay open source. The code, all the original GPL code has to stay open source and available. And that's it. Those are the requirements. You have to respect copyright, respect the license, and keep stuff open source. Those are the three requirements, the three main requirements of GPL 3.0. The only way you can claim that somebody... Anyway, he tried to come and tell me that me removing him and Sense from the About section of the app was a violation of GPL, and as well as removing donation links and stuff like that. That was also a violation of GPL, both of which are categorically false. Like, I did my research before I forked it and before I did anything. I did my research on the GPL license and what it required. And I kind of just rubbed me the wrong fucking way, because it was like, here's this developer who's kind of trying to like the way it came across to me, honestly, at the time, was like he thought that I didn't know, like basically like it was a case that he thought I was stupid, or that I wasn't informed enough to know that he was full of shit on that, or maybe he was just misinformed himself, which honestly is worse. But either way, that's how it ended up going down. And like, I was like, yo, like, it wasn't nothing like that. Like, I wasn't even advertising this like that. No. And or anything of that nature. Like, you know what I mean? I'm still working on this. I was gonna loop you in on it, once I had things in a more working state. And well, that's how it went. So so we kind of like patched things up there. He kind of apologized, but still insisted on me restoring his names to the About section, which I did for a time, up until this most recent snafu, and now I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna do what I want, and I'm gonna respect it. I'm gonna respect the GPL license, and I'm gonna follow the license. But everything else, all bets are off. I don't give a fuck. I'm not gonna give any unneeded anything. Like, you've got a credit in my README, CyberXero. If you watch this, you got a credit in my README, and that's all you're gonna get. So if you want to file a report with GitHub, we can go that route. But we both know you don't have a case. So let's just leave it at that. My project will do its thing. My fork will do its thing, and you can eat rocks. I don't know. But you know, he accused me of stealing his toolkit, or not of stealing his toolkit, but stealing his work, which is ridiculous. It's open source, bro. It's open source. I'm not claiming any original work as my own. I have full credits in my README. You know what I mean? Like, you can't claim that somebody's stealing your work because they forked your project and removed your name from the UI. That's not how open source licensing works, and you don't have any right to try to enforce that on anybody. But the situation continued because, you know, I'm obviously in a lot of Linux circles, and I've been like hearing these things about Xero, the author, and I'll be honest with you, like straight out the gate, I'm not gonna tell no lies here, no bullshit. I don't know what the truthfulness of it is, and that's why I was asking questions. But essentially, you know, I've heard some rumors and some claims that like I don't know if it was like now or back in the day when Zero Linux was first becoming a thing, but I've heard rumors and claims that Zero Linux, or that Dark Zero, has actually stolen people's code, like copied people's code verbatim and then changed the license and not given any attribution and things of that nature. You know, like actually violating licenses and just taking code and appropriating it. I don't know how true that is. A lot of the claims that I've seen come from like 2022, 2023, like before Zero Linux went on hiatus and everything. So I have no idea how true that is. I was just asking questions, but I was in a server and I was like, they were talking about how they had banned him from the server like very recently due to allegations surrounding his questionable practices and yada yada yada. And I started a thread and I was like, hey, like, you know, I would like to have us elaborate a little bit more on what these allegations are, because obviously if I'm forking the man's work and I'm maintaining forks of his projects, I want to know what kind of controversy might be surrounding the original code, if any. And so there was some back and forth, and like, you know, I was talking about it, and I was talking about the spat me and him had and everything else. And, you know, and I was like, oh, you know, I was like, you know, it would, I don't remember verbatim what I said, but basically it was like, you know, it was a roundabout way of me saying, you know, it would be some shit if he was coming after me the way he did about forking his kit when, you know, if these allegations are true. And the way I worded it was like hypothetical and shit, and like it kind of, I guess I could have worded it a little bit better, but the intent wasn't to fucking accuse him of anything. I was just like, you know, basically being like, well, if this is true, that's some shit, you know. And anyway, he sent me a long message. Apparently he had seen the message. I guess he's probably got an alt account in the server, because, you know, he probably got banned and put an alt account in there. I'm sure that's the case, because that's not weird or anything. Either that, or he's got somebody in there, you know, screenshotting shit and sending it to him, which is also possible. But either way, and he sent me a long message and was like, you know, basically telling me to go fuck myself, and that I'm spreading lies about him. And I'm like, I'm not spreading anything. I'm asking questions about allegations that were made. You know what I mean? Like, and this is not the first time I've heard that. I've heard it in the Cashy server too, that he used to steal work. So I, you know, I don't know, man. You know, talking about me spreading lies. It sounds like there's a lot of people out there saying the same thing. I'm not saying it's true, but you know, it definitely seems a little suspicious. But you know, hey. So that schism led me to this. This is my fork of the Zero Linux Toolkit, and I have done lots of stuff here, I've reworked lots of things. I incorporated the scripts from Zero Linux that this relies on, with full attribution, of course, and untouched licenses. I did do a minor update to the update script, so it reflects the fork here, and added a new script as well. Not a new script, but my CyberXero theme script, so that way we can do that. So I revamped the app Rust logic to make it more modern, and so that it would run dependency checks on a background thread instead of on the main thread like the original Toolkit does, which has the benefit of not causing the app to hitch horribly when you launch it, which happens on Zero Linux because ever since biometrics have been added, because it does dependency checks for those. But now it's nice and smooth when you open it. So I haven't done anything really with the drivers section. That's all pretty much original. I've been keeping it up to date with upstreams additions, like they added cooler control and I added cooler control. Customization, I added apply CyberXero themes, so this will actually install my CyberXero KDE Plasma desktop setup directly from the Toolkit, which is nice. Gaming tools, I completely rewrote the gaming. It was called Steam AIO, and it's now called Gaming Suite, and it actually intelligently checks for CachyOS repos and installs the CachyOS gaming meta and application meta. And if CachyOS repos aren't installed, then it installs a curated list of packages. As well as Heroic Games launcher from the AUR. And then I also made the I gave the Falcon D implementation a much needed overhaul, and now it installs the Falcon D GUI, as well as intelligently detects if the cache, basically if it can pull Falcon D from the CachyOS repos if they're present, or if they're not present and it can't pull them from Pacman, it'll pull the AUR version instead. Everything else is original here. Game scope's unchanged. Container VMs, this is entirely rewritten. These were originally originally Virt Manager and Virtual Manager and VirtualBox were both dependent on Zero Linux meta packages, which I completely did away with. They now install curated package lists. Basically achieves the same effect without relying on Zero Linux meta packages. I also added functionality so it can detect which ones aren't installed. Then if it is installed, you can easily uninstall it here via the app. I'm trying to add more like uninstall buttons to everything. Obviously that's still work in progress, and I haven't done it for everything yet, but basically everything that I've touched or added onto, I've tried to make it so that the Toolkit can also remove whatever it puts on in case the user decides they don't want it on their system anymore. Then we go down to multimedia tools. Pretty much all this is the same. I am planning on rewriting the OBS Studios to actually install native package instead of using Flatpak. And they're very the Toolkit is very Flatpak happy, and I'm trying to shift it to being more centered on native packages where possible. But they have the OBS Studio, Keditive and Jellyfin server, that's original. GPU screen recorder was added by me, that just installs GPU screen recorder GTK. And then I have basically made a Rust version of my handheld streaming services utility script. Like it wasn't a one-to-one just integrating that script into here. Like I actually essentially rewrote that utility in Rust specifically for the toolkit. So now the toolkit basically creates Chrome Flatpak web apps. Yes, it uses Flatpak, but that's because I also wanted to work on handhelds and GameScope session and shit. And native packages don't behave well in GameScope for some reason. You know, pretty much if you want to use an application in GameScope session, it seems you have to use a Flatpak. So that's why Chrome Flatpak. And I used Chrome because Chromium tends to have better resolutions than something Firefox based on streaming services. So, but you can basically select whatever streaming service you want. It's got other things too, like Discord, and, you know, things of that nature. But then it'll just install them and set them up. And it also does detect if this is running on a handheld and implements things slightly differently, like adds it to Steam as a non-Steam game and stuff. So just like my original utility script does. We got the kernel and scheduler, which manages kernel and schedulers. That's all original. Then we've got the servicing and system tweaks. I've made significant changes here, mostly to the UI because this is still kind of work in progress. I'm not sure if I'm going to stay with this design, but basically I started adding a bunch of stuff to here, and it was the way the original layout was. It was getting filled up, so I kind of revamped the UI. So the changes I've made here, I added a remove orphans function, which was mysteriously missing from the original toolkit. I changed update mirror list so it'll work, you know, with CacheOS repos and pretty much all repos on the system that have mirrors. And then, of course, I added functions to install the CacheOS repos, install the chaotic AUR, and yes, sir, even install the Zero Linux repo if you want to get access to those juicy Zero Linux packages. And obviously, we've got all the original functions like Plasmax 11 session, blah, blah, blah. So there's the X Package Manager, which is a package manager for Zero Linux. Was designed to not run on Arch. I had to fork it and then basically integrate it into my toolkit, the forked version, so that it will actually run. I do know that he recently said that it does have some issues. I haven't really played around with it too much. I just mostly wanted to make sure it was available, because I'm kind of taking it as because in one of our earlier spats he basically was like, oh well, don't worry about keeping up with upstream because we're going to make sure nothing that we use that we add to the toolkit will work on any other system. And I said, oh, bet. So I have been like making it my personal mission almost with this toolkit to make sure that every single thing that they try to implement I have here, and oftentimes before they do. Leading me into, and I've got update toolkit, so the toolkit it'll check basically the latest Git on my GitHub, and then if there's been a different commit, basically if there's been a new commit added, it'll recognize it and it'll update the toolkit. And I've added some optimization features, like similar to what you would see on CacheOS Hello, which was something somebody requested, which I was kind of planning on getting to that anyway, because that's kind of the general idea for this project for me, is like I'm basically just trying to make this a better CacheOS Hello. Not that there's anything wrong with CacheOS Hello, you know, it's a great little app, but kind of just trying to make it a little more full-featured and tailored to my uses. And then we got the biometrics, which which of these were going to be features. So there's the fingerprint reader. The fingerprint reader, I had to fork that application because it too had a distro lock. I forked it, fixed it, and it now compiles the fork, then gives you the option to uninstall. And then there's Howdy Face Unlock, which uses Zero Howdy QT, which was something made by CyberXero, which I don't believe as of yet it has a distro lock on it. But there's a reason for that, and the reason for that is because this application here is built to run on Howdy-bin, which isn't. Basically, it has weird dependency issues. It uses like a Python dlib that you can't easily get on Arch. You have to basically like download a very, very specific AUR package. So basically, like if you try to run this tool, like the stock Zero Toolkit on Arch, even if you get past the check, when you try to install this, it'll throw an error for it couldn't resolve its dependency for Python dlib because it wants a version of Python dlib that isn't in basically it isn't in the Arch repos. It is in the AUR, but it has a slightly different name, and I'm assuming that it probably comes pre-compiled or something on Zero Linux, so that way it will pass on Zero Linux, but it won't pass elsewhere. But I resolved this by adding the appropriate Python dlib package name from the AUR, and then using howdy-get instead of howdy-bin, and compiling Zero Howdy QT with that, so that works too. And I actually have this installable via the Toolkit before they do, so isn't that something? Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it. This is still a work in progress. I'm still planning on adding more things to it, fixing more things, changing more things, but I'm pretty happy with where it's at right now. And obviously, you can check this out on my GitHub. My GitHub's linked here on my YouTube channel. All this stuff that I'm working on and trying to make is there. By all means, come check it out. Come to the Discord. Got lots to talk about. So that's going to be it for me today, guys. We'll catch you next time. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.